Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, SJP Properties, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, Greenberg Traurig, Allied Partners. Additional funding is provided by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, and Terry's Investment Partners, Athena Group, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, CB Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Herbert J. Sims & Company, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Helmsley Spear, Jackson Development Group, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Kilroy Metal Products, Massey Knackle Realty Services, M&T Bank, Madison Realty Capital, Marcus and Millichap, Meriden Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Moynihan Organization, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Sheldrake Organization, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, Triangle Services, Witkoff Group, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoll, host of Building New York. You know, I love interviewing and profiling lives of Brooklyn boys. You know, I'm biased. I'm a Brooklyn boy. A couple of weeks ago I had my birthday, and this Brooklyn boy by the name of Robert Levine, who was born 57 years ago, I know I shouldn't say that, in Brooklyn, is my guest today. Robert is the chairman of RAL Companies. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you.
So, you were born in Brooklyn, Prospect Heights, I think, and you grew up in Midwood.
That's correct.
And, you know, it's always interesting to talk about grandfathers and relationships. And when we were meeting the other day, you said to me it was Isidore Levine, who was a painter or a schmierer, probably.
That's correct.
He was a schmierer. And Grandpa Isidore comes to America, becomes a commercial painter.
Correct.
And your father follows the roots.
Correct.
And your father goes to work with the painting company. But
right.
It changed. It wasn't Isidore Levine. It was I. Levine now?
Right. Then it became I. Levine Company. Right.
So tell me about I. Levine, because the interesting thing that you had said to me, which is always a great point, is that in order for you to be with your dad, you had to go out on the sites.
That's right.
So at 3 years of age, you remember being at a painting?
I was right there. Well, he became Sammy the Schmierer to the, at that time, the supermarket industry that was growing and booming.
How'd they become, you know, we were talking about this, you know, growing up in Brooklyn, you know, there was the German supermarket, Bohag,
right.
Then there was Wallbaum's, and Sammy the Schmierer specialized in supermarkets.
Right. They had a relationship with the Wallbaum family, which came from my grandfather first, and then my father, and then subsequently myself. And as you said, I used to, in order to be with my father, because it was the kind of thing that you worked, you know, he worked all the time, you know, that was his passion, I guess, as mine is what I do, but he was doing it for a livelihood.
So how did the Schmierer son, you know, the kid who put the paint, decide, and you told me at a young age you decided that you really wanted to be an architect. I mean, how do you decide to become an architect? And then a developer, I mean, that gets even stranger.
Well, it kind of was, I wanted to be in construction from a young age. And as I said to you, probably going back to 3 and 4 years old, I'd go with my grandfather who would go to the jobs, and my father would be there actually working. And I was exposed to the whole construction process. I was fascinated by it. and started to really look at it. And there was a gentleman then, as time went on, there was a gentleman at Walbaum's who became very close to, was very close to my father and my family. And he was a graduate engineer, and he kind of became my mentor. And when I was deciding what to do, I had a lot of talent as far as art as well, and I was looking at advertising art versus architecture versus engineering and those things. And you know, he once, I remember him saying to me, you know, advertising, what's advertising? It's nothing, you know. Architecture and engineering, that's the thing. And I pursued that avenue. I graduated with a degree in architecture and planning.
How do you end up in Cincinnati? I mean, you know,
I was,
you know, Coventry, Kentucky, you know, Cincinnati, you know, growing up in Brooklyn, the only thing we knew were the Reds. The Cincinnati Reds played the teams.
I looked at different schools, and I was actually, it was, and it's kind of an entire process, because in high school I almost went to Brooklyn Tech, but opted not to, and ended up going to James Madison High School because I was still looking at a lot of options other than straight engineering and all. And then when it came time to look at colleges, I looked at different colleges. I was going to go to Pratt or Cooper Union initially, and was fascinated by both of those schools. And then in reading and with a guidance counselor and somebody else I met, I came across the University of Cincinnati, which had an outstanding School of Architecture and Planning, and I wanted large-scale architecture. I didn't want to do houses. You know, I was kind of looking at site planning and architecture as it related to...
You didn't want to make any more 40,000 square foot bohacks?
No, I did, actually. It was the shopping center idea. You know, it was America growing. Everybody was in cars. That was it. Long Island was booming. You know, I was looking at these things, and everywhere I went, it was always to a shopping center, because that's the things my father was painting, and that's what was going on. So I learned about the University of Cincinnati, and had found out about its program, which also incorporated the co-op program, which meant that unlike other schools, you were basically enrolled to go to school 12 months a year for the 5 or 6 years that the program was. And you, after the first year, you alternated. It was on quarters, so you'd go to school for 3 months, work 3 months, and school 3. And I thought, for me, that was ideal because it would keep my attention.
So during the 6 years, where were some of your internship programs?
I worked at an architectural firm in New York. Initially, first, I actually, in one of my first working jobs in terms of that, I worked for what is now AFA Protective Systems, which was the automatic fire alarm company going way back, and I was like a drafting engineer designing fire alarm systems in many of the buildings in Lower Manhattan, you know, One New York Plaza and some of these, which was great exposure. Then from there, I was in an architectural firm that primarily did a lot of work for supermarkets, McDonald's restaurants, and things of that nature. And then I took an assignment, actually, and took a job in Cincinnati, which started out as a co-op program and ended up where I stayed for about 1.5 years after that. And I was the planner in charge of the Model Cities program in downtown Cincinnati for the west end of Cincinnati, which was really quite interesting and gave me, I guess, my first exposure to really, you know, urban areas, urban renewal, opportunities with conversions in older buildings. I was always fascinated with older buildings. I worked on a project, trying to do a project in Cincinnati to convert the former Burger Brewery to a project very similar to Giardelli Square. But that never went through, and when that didn't go through, we actually had a planning and design firm in Cincinnati called City Systems, and at that point I was offered an opportunity to come back to New York to become a junior partner in an architectural firm.
At 24, you were
24, 25,
24,
somewhere around
25,
there.
and
I had worked there before.
Right, and you were already married at this time.
Yes, I was married. My wife came to Cincinnati with me. She was teaching in Cincinnati, so it was great. It was a great.
You know, at a young age, you become a partner at this architectural firm, which you said to me really was. It was more than an architectural firm. You were able to encompass design, architecture, and other.
Well, my whole approach to design was always really to make good design affordable to people and to try to impose it upon properties that, you know, or to corporations that didn't care about design. And that was really focused towards supermarkets, shopping centers, fast food restaurants, you know, which would allow us then to do other more interesting work, because what happened was, where we had great relationships with corporate people or the owners of companies, as they had more confidence, they then said, you know, why don't you build a home for me or design a home? And it led to all that. I built my own home and designed my own home first. And I recall Ira Walbaum particularly saying to me, you know, you know, he thought my house was great, and he said, okay, you practiced with your money, now do mine. You know, and those were the kind of things that would happen.
Now, you said you stayed with this firm for a number of years, and when you were about 30,
right,
you went out and started RAL Companies,
right,
which is what today is, but you started this full-service design.
Correct.
But with a great deal of emphasis in the supermarket. But more than, you know, designing a supermarket, you said you were like the director of architectural and planning for Walbaum's.
Right.
I mean, when I worked in Walbaum's behind the register, I didn't know that. But, you know, I remember
those colored checkouts and aisle markers. We did all that for you. You know, we made it very appealing. The floor and all that, the colors on the floor. It was. I developed.
How appealing could you make vinyl asbestos tile?
The patterns. You had designs. You had colors. You know, the colors were a new thing. It wasn't all just white anymore. And it was, you know, and then it was vinyl composition tile. It was no longer vinyl asbestos tile.
Right. So at 30, you go out. Do you have partners when you?
I had initially there were a number of people that left the former firm with me, and the intent was that we were going to provide a full range of design services. And what we meant by that was not only the architecture, but the interior designs and a lot of the industrial design as well, and some of the products and, you know, different things that would just make it a total environment. And that meant the signage, the decor. You know, supermarkets there was more than just, you know, saying this was dairy and this was meat. You know, we thought there was a lot in that. And, you know, you used to think, you know, someone pushes a shopping cart down an aisle. When they're looking at that cart, the floor is the backdrop for it. So if the floor looks good and bright.
You know, I think, you know, just as an aside, and you were talking about your son Ian, who's been on my show, you know, I was up in Westchester, and my wife and I wanted to go into Trader Joe's. Not Trader Joe's, Stu Leonard's.
Okay.
And Stu Leonard's, I think, is a brilliant supermarket because you got to go through every aisle to get out of there.
Right. You can't turn around. You can't stop.
It's a maze. You can't, and it's really a creative approach because you're forced into it, and it's a great thing. So, but let's leave the supermarkets, because you said to me your life with One Brooklyn Bridge Park and with the 25th Street and 90 Franklin. I want to get into that, but you said you were the architectural planner and, you know, doing everything for the Walbaums, and you had other clients, but then Ira Walbaum decides to sell the chain.
Right.
And what happens now? I
Well,
mean,
at that
no more
point,
business?
we were doing, we had a lot of other clients.
The Packers were out of business.
They were out of business. Packers was gone, Bohack was gone, you know, Finest was around, but they were soon to become Stop and Shop. So we were doing a lot of other work at the time as well, you know, different things. I had always kind of done, one of the things that we found, we did a lot of shopping centers for developers as well. And we were always considered the unnecessary evil to every developer. Because remember, the architect's purpose is to get a building permit. And then after that, every developer thinks they can do it better. And I felt that I had an obligation to myself and my people, or my organization, and many of those are still with me.
Right. Levine painted. The Schmearers
is still around, but
right.
Yeah, but that's not my livelihood.
But it's still around. It's still a union contractor.
It's Ilco Painting Corporation.
Right,
now.
that's right.
But the point was that I always believed that you could do things right, and you can do things economically, and you could actually do what you told people you were going to do also. And as a result of that, when Walbaum's was sold to A&P, we kind of made an evaluation, because at that point A&P questioned the depth of the material that was on the drawings, and why did they need all of this? You know, we only need a floor plan and a reflected ceiling plan. And I said, well, if you have all these details, you might not have all the change orders, you know, things like that. And they were not really interested in that. So I was at that point, as I said, I had always done 1 or 2 buildings for myself every year,
Right.
and those were.
Right. And you said the buildings, Hempstead. Let's talk about Hempstead.
Okay, we
I
started
mean, Hempstead
out.
was,
Okay.
you know, if we go back many years ago, Hempstead was the home of A&S. Hempstead was an area you used to go shopping.
Well, we missed that time.
Right, we missed that time. And then when you got to Hempstead, Hempstead was.
Right, Hempstead was bare bones.
Was
we
bare
were
bones.
not the hub anymore.
Right. So what happened? What do you do in Hempstead?
Okay, we started out. RAL started out in Garden City in an industrial building that had no windows, but the rent was right. We were there for about 3 years.
You can always paint windows outside.
Well, we were there for about 3. It was great because nobody went home early. It was okay. Anyway, we went from there. We grew and we needed space, and I was not, you know, to spend money on rent was really something that I was allergic to. So in Hempstead, which was right near Garden City, and we could say we were almost in Garden City. The former Village Hall and Firehouse had a for sale sign on it. Now understand, it had not been occupied for at least 10 or 15 years. It had about 1,000 pigeons in it that were alive. The dead ones couldn't count. There were no windows. It was terrible. It was a 3-story building on the corner of on Fulton Avenue and Helen Keller Way, which was next to the Helen Keller building. So and it was terrible. But it had some architectural features that were exceptional. We basically gutted the entire building, exposed all the brick walls, put in round ductwork, painted it red. And in 1981, this was pretty risque. The offices were great, and they really made a statement for what we were. There were no walls that were on 90-degree angles. Everything was a 45-degree angle. It was really quite impressive. And we were there up until we'd utilize different portions of it as our business grew. We would take more space. When it didn't, we would cut back. But we were actually there until 5 years ago, 5.5, 6 years ago. And
now, also in this creative time, you decided to venture into becoming a supermarket mogul?
That was after
Wallbaums, you go upstate?
Oh, no, that was after. It was after, you know, after Wallbaums. And then when I pared down the design business to really do work for our own account only. One of our first projects was as I said, we had a number of different projects we did. We did a number of renovations or rehabs of landmark buildings that we had, like the Department of Motor Vehicles in Hempstead.
You told me you like motor vehicles.
Yeah, they were a good tenant for a while. And then we built a new building for them out in Amityville on Route 110. They've since moved out of all these buildings and we don't own them anymore. But anyway, but then we went and we did an extraordinary project in Annapolis, Maryland, and it was a multiple number of mid-rise buildings with indoor, outdoor swimming pools. The buildings were designed magnificently. It was, when we started and broke ground for these buildings, literally we had people in line to buy them. And this is how I now relate to the cycles in real estate. And what happened was the people were in line because they could sell their homes in Annapolis for 3 or 4 times what they were worth. But then when we were ready to deliver these lovely condominium units, the people's contracts on their homes had fallen out and they couldn't close on the units. So I then learned what it was to become one of 2 things. I could be like other developers and possibly walk away and ruin my relationships with lenders and whatnot, or become the janitor for the building and stick with it and still have the same banking relationships I have today that I had then. That was the cycle, you know.
Well, let's fast forward.
Yeah.
I don't know how you end up in Telluride. I mean, I remember Brooklyn, and then Annapolis, Maryland, smearing paint. Telluride. What do you do in Telluride?
So then, I have because we had this business had grown substantially, and
And I only got 10 minutes to go through the rest of this,
okay.
but tell me.
We had the business was substantial. In my late 20s, I qualified to become a member of the Young Presidents Organization. Okay, at that time, I was on forums and different things, and I, met some people who I'm still very good friends with. One in particular, who's a very dear friend, and he and his wife had 2 children, just a little older than my 3 children. And the one thing he told me was I had to get a hobby, and go away on family vacations. It was very important. So we took up skiing, and ultimately the goal was, and we traveled with them a lot, and the goal was that we would go to all these different ski areas. And my philosophy and my wife's philosophy was we never need to buy a home anywhere or do anything, because you want the flexibility and you want to do this.
But then you develop a complex in Telluride.
So then we go to Telluride, Colorado, and it's unlike any other ski area we've ever been in. It's magnificent. Everything is great. It's unpretentious. Everything is wonderful. The skiing is extraordinary. So first, I end up building a home there. And we built a home, and then in skiing all the time, I would ski right past the middle of everything. There was this property, and the real estate developer got the better part of me. And I started pursuing this piece of real estate there, which was the first project we did there, and then got into the zoning. And it started out that the property was being offered for a project that could have 12 condominiums on it and something. But then if you read the zoning and you start to get creative and you want to design the building and use additional stone and do this and do that, all of a sudden you get bonuses. And I ended up with 32 condominium units, 10,000 square feet of retail, and 32 underground parking spaces on this property. And they said, this is wonderful, So we built that. We had, at the time, there was another gentleman that owned the ski company, who building out in the ski areas was a challenge in itself. And they said, oh, if you start building now, you'll never get a project like this takes 3 years out here. And I said, you guys are crazy. This is 12 months and we're in and out of this thing. And we made a bet, and I built it in 12 months. I was probably the first one that ever built through the winter there. And that opened. Okay. Now we go.
Okay. We're going to leave Telluride because I got 10 minutes and I got to get into New York.
But we could go to Telluride now. What we're building there.
That's later. We're going to go to Franklin. Okay. You go in. Here's the guy, an architect, a designer, a skier, a supermarket operator, a schmearer, who now.
We didn't do the supermarket operator thing in between.
I know we did. Okay. But it's the end of the 90s, and you go in and you buy a building and you convert it. Tell me about that. 90 Franklin?
90 Franklin, which was 271 Church Street. It was the former Health and Human Resources City of New York that was being vacated. The building was going to be delivered vacant, or what they considered vacant, because they left everything behind. But it was a 17-story building. It was an exceptional footprint from a design standard, 75 by 75, either 2 units on a floor or a whole floor unit. We were clearly the groundbreaking guys in Tribeca with this building. The Tribeca Grand had not been built yet. We were on that what everybody said, and to quote Cranes at that time, I had paid an eye-popping number or something like that, and they thought I was crazy.
Within the next 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you about the eye-popping number you paid in Brooklyn.
But, so we did that from the day we started construction to the day we closed on the first unit was 1 year. The project sold out in basically, I think, 3 months or something like that. It was a great project. 270 Broadway was the former state office building, sealed bid kind of deal. Everybody looked at it, what do you do with this building, lower floors, this, that, the other thing. I took the building, we basically created 3 buildings stacked one on top of the other, 100,000 square foot office building, which is now 86 chambers. Then we did 80 chambers, which was floors 8 through 15 that were luxury rentals, subsequently sold as condominiums. And then Tower 270, which was 16 through 28, which were luxury condos, and it's all sold.
Where you live today.
Where I live today.
Now, after that, okay, you live in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan. After that, you then go Loft 25?
Loft 25, yeah, we did. I guess, well, we had been working, I had been working for years, you know, trying to see if I could ever get 360 Furman Street from the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Let's go to 360 Furman Street.
Okay.
You see these ugly buildings in Brooklyn Heights off the Gowanus, 360. What do you do over there? One Brooklyn Bridge Park for my
360
viewers.
Furman Street is at the foot of Geralman Street, literally 75 feet from the water's edge in Brooklyn Heights, between Atlantic and Geralman. Owned by the Jehovah's Witnesses, never sold any property. Finally, you know, properties are realizing significant values. I talk to them, nothing's happening. A year later, they call me and they tell me, we are thinking of selling it now. Every developer in New York wanted the property. The whole thing is, this property was also going to be surrounded by the park that is currently under construction, Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is 85 acres on the waterfront, which also nobody believed was going to happen, but now it is under construction, so it's happening. I was successful in getting to the end where there were 3 bidders left. Finally, some of the ethical stuff that we did in the past and the whole thing played out finally with a seller that wasn't just looking at price. Because we said to them, remember, no matter what, your name is always going to be associated with the sale of this property. So it doesn't matter what we do to it, you guys will have sold it to us, and if the wrong guy buys this and upsets the community.
So let's go. What is now One Brooklyn Bridge Park? It's loft condominiums, it's cabanas.
It's 449 residential units, everything from loft condominiums to garden lofts to penthouses to townhouses. It also has a 500-car attended parking facility, 132 condo spaces, and 90,000 square feet of retail that will be open to the park.
And simultaneously you decide to do something called the New Yorker?
Right, which is a conversion of a luxury rental building that was built as a condominium on the Upper East Side, that we subsequently gutted all the apartments and have sold as condominiums.
And then Loft 25, which is a conversion on
It's a conversion of a former printing industrial building on 25th Street between 9th and 10th, with a new sliver building tied to it, adjacent to it, for just some additional new
With
units.
60 seconds, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the barge. Quickly, you got 32 seconds to explain the barge.
The barge is a 129-foot commercial barge that we gutted in Amsterdam. It's now on the canals in Dijon, France. We designed and built the whole thing out. It has 4 staterooms, a lounge, chef's kitchens, wine bars. It travels in the canals and has bicycles and minivans, and it was all a design project.
You know, when I went back from my roots, you know, at least I'm happy you went back to Brooklyn, you know, the One Brooklyn Bridge Park, to 360 Furman Street. I don't know about barges, but I'd say that you have done a very creative job. You have 2 sons in the business.
Yes.
Ian and Spencer. You
That's
have a
correct.
daughter.
That's correct.
Who's very creative, who might one day be in the business.
Might one day. Right now, she's a marketing director.
And so, you know, it's a very interesting thing. So the paint business is still alive. The architectural business is still alive.
Right.
And the developer is more than alive because you continue on.
We try to do it all.
Right. And would you say you want the next generation to be schmearers and developers and everything else?
I'd say we put the schmear on the bottom of the list, but in terms of the other things, the whole principle behind the entire organization is when we sit down every Tuesday morning and we have a meeting to discuss everything going on, basically everybody responsible for some facet of the project is sitting around the table, and they can't point fingers at anyone outside. That's it.
So I would like to say that I'm very proud that I've had a Brooklyn-born guy who I know and I like, who's truly become a builder of New York and barges and Colorado, but I would be remiss. And
You've got to mention the Capella project and
the
Telluride.
Capella and the Capella project in Telluride. See you next month.
Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, SJP Properties, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, Greenberg Traurig, Allied Partners. Additional funding is provided by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, Antares Investment Partners, Athena Group, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, CB Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Herbert J. Sims & Company, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Helmsley Spear, Jackson Development Group, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Kilroy Metal Products, Massey Knackle Realty Services, M&T Bank, Madison Realty Capital, Marcus and Millichap, Meriden Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Moynihan Organization, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Sheldrake Organization, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, Triangle Services, Whitcoff Group, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.